Welcome to SIIMcast, a podcast brought to you by the Society for Imaging Informatics and Medicine.
Greetings, everyone. It's Jason here from SIIMcast, and today I'm excited to share a conversation with someone who really needs no introduction, but here is one anyway. Don Dennison, with over 20 years in imaging informatics. Don has a wealth of knowledge to share, and in this conversation we dove into the highlights of the SIIM24 Annual Meeting. We looked at the evolving landscape of enterprise imaging. We looked at how the role of enterprise IT has changed over the years, and the role of AI in healthcare. So if you want to catch the full video, check out the link in the podcast description. And with all that said, let's jump into it. Honored to be with Don Dennison today. Welcome, Don. And we'll kick things off. It was about a month ago that we were all at National Harbor for SIIM24. And I always think of SIIM, if you thought of it, imaging as like a sports season, SIIM as the beginning of the new imaging season. So I was wondering, like, what did you take away from the meeting as far as looking towards what's coming up and what you think is on the horizon for the next little while?
Yeah, I attended a number of sessions, and a lot of them are on AI, obviously, and I'll touch on that. A couple of things I always think about when I think about SIIM. First of all, I think we're extremely lucky to have a society that has had the stability and the staff that we have. I've been going for over 20 years, and when was the last time you saw signs that were wrong or logistics that were poor or typos? It's just we can concentrate on the content and the learning. And I don't think that's as common in as many societies. I think they often struggle maybe just with volunteer staff and those type of things. So I think it's important for those who have attended SIIM or are thinking about going to SIIM is that we just should acknowledge it's really well run. And the second thing is people often talk about the social aspect of SIIM. They cite hallway conversations. And I was thinking about it. And while those are very important, a lot of people I think may perceive that as just, oh, catching up with old colleagues, how are you doing, what's going on in your life? I reflected on the hallway conversations, and a lot of them are, here's what I'm seeing. Are you seeing the same thing? Or here are the four paths that people are going down. What do you hear people doing? Or what do you think of that kind of thing? Or I'm working on a paper and I need a contributor. And so these are not just, how's it going kind of social things. Like I reflect on them as like, I had some amazing conversation. You know what? It forces me to keep my brain sharp. Asked about topics that I haven't spent a lot of time thinking about. And I'm standing there and I'm like, okay, now I have to think about this and I consider it. And then when I come home, I sometimes read more about it, or I'll say, you know what? I may not know as much as I should about this, but I know who does. Let's get together and talk. And then sometimes that leads into a webinar or a paper or a talk or something like that. So I think that one of the key things that I enjoy about SIIM, and one of the key things that continue to have value for me, is that rich garden of new ideas and ideation in hallways and collaborations that come up. So I think that was one of the things that, when you asked me about this, I reflected on.
So
in terms of, so go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, it is amazing how many times when you speak to people from different locations, they're tackling the same challenge. They're going at it from different ways. And if you could just put those together, it's like a Lego piece that can solve the problem.
Yeah. What's funny, and I do spend a lot of my time, people are on different phases of their journey. Some have become very good at certain, say, policies and procedures and operations, but they're dealing with not state-of-the-art equipment. And you have other people who have spent all kinds of money on the latest software, the latest everything, but they don't have the talent, or they don't have the theory, or they haven't invested in the people to make it. And I always use it, you need a car and a driver. You can have the world's best car, but if you don't know how to drive it, you're not going to get the results. And you can have people who know the theory and hardworking and are very sharp and very good, but they're constantly fighting against the system, which is outdated or doesn't support the workflows they need. And so they're dealing with too many workarounds and too many hacks to try and just get through the day kind of thing. And that goes to a little bit about one of the things that I've observed is if I think back 10, 20 years ago, and you would run into those, you know, leadership, legendary PAX admins. We all can remember ones who would speak at SIIM, and they just seem to know everything. It's just, and back then, the PAX admin or people who are on the PAX team were expected to know about and be able to perform functions, and were responsible for things from networking to server builds to HL7 interfaces to scripting to desktop integrations to
application
web launch stuff to display protocols to work list build. Like they did all of it. And then as we go through, we went from this healthcare used to be, there was an IT group within each ancillary department. So radiology IT, cardiology IT, lab IT, etc. And then under the great unifying force of the High Tech Act in the US, where the EMR came in and it was this gigantic budget item, and the CIO drew a lot of that budget control and also the staffing control. And so we went from these silos, clinical department silos, to say, oh, we need one IT department. We need to standardize IT practices. It's the only way to be safe and apply security and everything and manage budget costs. And also to have a larger pool of talent, which we can apply to all these various departments. Great, makes sense. Well, we did that. What's happened now is that there's such silos within IT. So I'll be working in a thing. Okay, I work on compute. Okay, so you understand this stuff. Oh no, that's the virtual server team. Okay, let's talk with it. Nope, that's the VDI team who does that. We need another person on the call. Okay, we're going to do this HL7 interface. Okay, that's one of these two people from the EMR. Okay, let's talk about, nope, that's the interface engine team who does that. That's somebody else. Oh, so you end up, you want to do a workflow end to end, and you want to come up with a good solution. You need 17 people on the call, and it takes 2 months to find availability in their schedule. So we've gone from this kind of can do everything quite well in radiology IT to now the PACS admin, they can't touch the servers, they can't touch the network, they can't often touch HL7. In some cases, the system they're on doesn't give them the tools to touch the work list, right? Because the work list might be provided by the EMR, like the RIS, or it could be provided by something else. So it all depends on the system. Like what they can do is greatly reduced. And I posited that we have atrophied as an imaging informatics community as to what we know. I often have to explain imaging informatics fundamental theory of things when I have conversations with these multidisciplinary teams. So imaging analysts and PACS admins who don't have it, like they're 2-3 years into their career, most of them have a background in either general IT or coming from EMR through RIS over to PACS, and they don't understand a lot of the theories of what happens inside of a PACS.
Or they're a technologist, maybe.
Or the technology, or the workflows, or the internal processes that, or they only know the system they're getting rid of, or the ones they've had, and they assume all PACS work like that, and they have all these manual workflows, and I'm like, yeah, that's completely automated everywhere else. You're just doing it because of the system you have, and try to get them to understand not to repeat that. And the same thing with HL7. The HL7 team will say, we send orders only on patient arrival, and I'm saying, there are many things you can do on appointment scheduling that triggers, and you have to educate them as to why you should do something different than what they did 15 years ago. So I think we're at this state where SIIM is very important, and these conversations are very important, because I find myself explaining a lot more the fundamentals, the 101s about what is an order, why do we care about it, what does it do, what does the trigger do, how do we use the information inside of it, what information we should trust from the order, and what should we trust from ADT, and depending on the type of information. Educating not just healthcare staff, but in many cases vendor staff who are relatively new to these. Yeah, there was a paper I participated in, published in JDI, now JIM, and it was called "There's a New Sheriff in Town When Imaging IT Takes Over Radiology," something like that. And anywhere in there, I talked about what are the things that get valued between enterprise IT versus, say, radiology IT. There are some common things that they both value. But if you look at what is the key thing that I see most common as based on commentary and based on what they state is important, among general radiology, or sorry, enterprise IT, is standardization of technology. They want to get as much to one storage technology so they don't have to know 7 different things. They want to get one server virtualization technology. They want to get to one set of technologies for network infrastructure and equipment. In the HL7, they want to, in many cases, 10, 15 years ago, radiology department had their own interface engine. They've been told they can't have that anymore. The people all move up to this central utility service for the enterprise that controls everything. And there's some good reasons for that. But again, standardization. And we see, I don't know when people are watching this, but very recently there was a very large implication, and it's happened before, where all these enterprises are buying all the same technology, and when that technology gets compromised, they all suffer at the same time. Yet, what I view on the radiology IT side, if you looked at what is really important to the person who's passionate about that job, is actually solving the problem, seeing the radiologist saying, now I can do my job better, and you've given me an ability to focus on the medicine that I chose to do my career in. And I'm not struggling with the systems. And if they're radiology, perhaps among all others, are most dependent upon IT systems more than many other doctors. Without it, today they just simply can't function. So I think it's one of those things that, how do we find a balance where we have people who have enough capability and autonomy and authority around their job function and knowledge of these areas, that they're going to stay happy enough in their job? Because I think once you take a person who's used to being creative, solving problems, and then getting that feedback from the end users or their boss, or just knowing it's done right and that there's a higher quality work product coming out in their organization, if you take too many parts away from them, I don't know that they're going to stay in that job. And that concern.
I was going to ask, so we were talking about enterprise IT. At SIIM, one of the big topics was around 10 years of enterprise imaging. And it's interesting to see you've been involved in many of those white papers. I think there's about 17 white papers that we've published as a community. And where do you see this evolving over the next little while? And maybe I'll attack that from this perspective, as what I'm seeing in many cases is organizations want to perform enterprise imaging and they lack a cohesive strategy on what that means. It's similar to what we see with AI. It's FOMO, I want to do this thing, and then they just start running towards whatever specialty seems to be making the loudest noise. So I'm curious your thoughts around that perspective of it.
Yeah, so I'll summarize what I'm encountering. So every time I talk to whatever role it is that has the overall vision, strategy related to, I'll just say medical imaging, because it often spans radiology, cardiology, like the diagnostics, and then into others as well, which in the others, it often overlaps heavily between the EMR and the imaging devices and any type of imaging management software, like a PACS or similar concept. There's always great desire to have this one ring to in the darkness bind them, like this great system that will do all of it. And I say, okay, let's put that as part of the strategy. And so then they say, these are the things we want to do. I said, okay, great. But right now, radiology is on fire. You've got a 25-year-old PACS that you haven't upgraded the hardware on for 7 years because you've been waiting on a budget cycle, and then COVID hit. So you're dying. And so that's the burning platform. So until you get radiology under control, don't talk about endoscopy images. So okay, that makes sense. We get that all working, and we achieve some success either with a new system or an upgraded system or workflow improvements, process improvement, staffing, or whatever it takes, whether it's the driver of the car, get it all set up. Okay, there's this point in the horizon. As soon as we get done this, we're going to get right on that enterprise imaging. And again, this is my experience. And two things happen. One is, increasingly, everybody wants to know what's the ROI, what's the business case. And I can tell you very easily how to get rich in radiology. I can't tell you how to get rich in enterprise imaging and non-diagnostic imaging. The money on the vendor side and on the staffing side and on the health system side and on the faculty of medicine side, that's not what's going to get them rich. So it gets stalled there. But let's say somebody says, look, we don't care about the money. We care about patient care and we're going to do the right thing. Okay, so we get past that. So the next thing they say is, now let's make it a priority. A couple things happen. One, oh, we just bought a hospital. Oh, we just opened 3 new imaging centers. Oh, we got to do a data migration, consolidate, cut them over to our EMR and our PACS and everything. So we'll do it right after we get done this. And by the way, we're going to buy another hospital every 18 to 24 months and consolidate. And so this becomes, there's always something being put in front of it. The other thing is you go to the faculty group and you say that we're going to take this PACS, which is primarily a radiology PACS, may do other things, but it's primarily what it do. And we're going to start prioritizing getting some pictures from the burn unit put in there. And the radiology goes, you mean you're going to do that before you give us the 17 AI apps we've asked for? No. This is a much higher priority than these little pictures you want to take over there. So what I'm seeing is everybody believes in it, but there's always a higher priority. And those things just keep getting put in front. And they are legitimate priorities. Like buying another health system, you can't get 4 sites onto one PACS. And now you get a 5th site. You can't just leave it like that. You got to know the value. You understand the value of having one EMR, one reporting solution, one PACS, one archive. You understand it. So once you're faced with having to solve that again, you have to solve it. So I think that there's been some great advancement in those white papers and in some of the anatomy terminology stuff and in the discussion of it. But in the rooms that I'm in, which is a lot of larger academic healthcare systems, it's something that's interesting, but they've always got a burning priority ahead of it. And that's basically what I'm seeing.
Okay, so I'm going to move on to AI. Before I do that, I'd be remiss to say, so we're looking back 10 years. I just wanted to acknowledge you and the team won the Educator Award for the work that you started 10 years ago with Hackathon. Do you want to comment on, because the Hackathon is quite a monster right now. It's amazing what comes out of there, but the collegial spirit of everything, and it must feel great to be part of one of the forefathers of that initiative.
Yeah, it's funny. I was talking with Chris Meenan, who he and I came up with the idea at the beginning, and then obviously there's been a lot of people, including Brad and Mark Coley, our president, Mark Coley, Mohamed, Steve. I'd be remiss not to mention Steve Langer and Wyatt Tellis, others who, in the journey, made significant contributions. Christopher Toland and others. When we started it, I started with this concept that we can write stuff down, which we do in the DICOM standards, and people can read it. That's one way people can learn. We can give talks at SIIM or in webinars, whatever, so they can listen to it. But where can they actually try it? Where can they do it? And I'm like, it's not, because when we did this, you have to remember, I think the last of the 3 main, not counting the Watto URI, which was quite old, the main 3, your Stowe, Keto, and Watto RS, they had just finished in like October of the year prior, and we're talking about doing a hackathon. So we went from this standard is just finished. DCM for CHE, which was the software used at the time, was just coming out with its first alpha version. We were going to do it in the cloud, which we had no experience with in the cloud. And so we're like, when I remember presenting it to the board, I'm like, this is as crazy as it gets, but we're just the right type of crazy to pull this off. So let's go for it. And we only need enough money to get the servers up and running. Then, of course, we had no data. So we had to try and find some kind of data to jam in there, which eventually got obviously improved with the pseudo patient data that went in there. But Brad Jenru got those servers up and running at 11 p.m. the night before the hackathon.
Wow.
It was as close to like a Mission Impossible movie ending, with the thing burning down as it gets. So crazy times. But yeah, it was a lot of fun back then. It was just, we didn't, there was no rule book or anything, just try it out and go for it. And it was a small group to start with, but then obviously it's grown.
Yeah, a huge. Carrie had 5 teams for herself, and yeah, it's incredible.
And it's interesting, like, yeah, we got it all up and running, and it was, the funny thing was, is that first of all, trying to get people to understand the hackathon doesn't just happen in 3 days. And I must have said 20 times, I'm like, the servers are available 12 months of the year. You can be hacking for 3 years and then show up with a whole commercial product if you want to. There's no rules against doing stuff outside of those hours. And I think the hackathon, just the concept is that it's usually time constrained, but it's in the cloud, it's available, and we can do it at any time. And that took a lot of people a long time to get their head wrapped around. And also, that platform got used for education at things like DICOM meetings and others. And that's part of the way I see the community at SIIM is participating. We're not just consumers of and promoters of or explainers of these other areas where like standards definition. We are advocates for it. We are contributors for it. We're trying to get our community to become more involved in defining the future. So that's something I was proud of.
Awesome. Okay, so I will wrap up. I don't want to take up too much of your time, but before we do, I just wanted to close out. Of course, we have to talk about our artificial intelligence when we talk about SIIM. I went through the poster area. I think out of whatever it was, 30 to 40 posters, I think 4 of them did not mention AI or ML or deep learning. Just thoughts about what we're seeing. It seems like the acceptance is here. It's not about if, it's about what to do and a strategy again and governance. And what are you seeing as far as in operations on the field when you're working with your clients?
Yeah, I've given talks on this for almost 10 years now, and it's at peak hype, and I keep saying that for the last 3 years. The peak just keeps getting higher. So I try to be a pragmatist, and I try to break things down very simply. And I say, okay, what does it do? I don't care what's inside the box, right? What does it do? What goes in? What are the data inputs, human inputs? What comes out? And what controls do we have to determine with what comes out is accurate, real, and correct? If we have no controls, we're in real trouble. There's no way to check to say, is that deliverable accurate? In other words, much of it can come out, and a highly trained radiologist can look at it and say, I concur with the outcome or I disagree. And then they can have procedures to try and correct if the software gets it wrong or maybe misleading, like it says, well, it's a low probability, and the RAD says, no, it is absolutely for sure a finding. And they need to try to somehow document or correct that. They can have those procedures. The interesting thing is I've given talks on what are some ways. First of all, the enterprises should have some framework for evaluating AI, right? So if it detects a disease that only happens once a month, or it's only good on procedures that you do 3 a day of, or it's going to have a moderate, slightly improved, reduced risk for the disease classification, but if it's applicable to many patients, many procedures, serious problems, and has a measurable improvement, that would be considered quite good. And on top of that, evaluating the feasibility of implementation. If you can't implement it in your environment, and by that, I'll have people who operate imaging centers, their IT staff is one person who manages everything from the phone system to all the IT to the network to everything. That person can't manage a strategic AI, like a strategy and evaluation and piloting and a proper surveillance of its workings, like you just can't. So you have to also look and say, can we succeed with who we are, what we have, and what we're willing to invest? That's another aspect I think people take for granted. And then the cost structure, of course, right? What does it cost, and what cost do you have to commit to, and those type of things. So I think I've often extolled the need for that, and I've proposed models. I know that the RSNA has talked about some models, and I know other people within the SIIM community in papers have proposed certain aspects, like aspects to consider in your model, evaluation model. But I'll tell you, I've given these talks, and the radiology, this is perfect. This is exactly what we need. We need a structure, we need a framework, we need everything. As soon as they leave the room, they run down the hallway. Yeah, I need it. It's whatever they can buy. Here are the 17 things that breast imaging wants. Here are the 22 that body wants. And there's your head of radiology or the CIO or director of clinical applications within the responsible department. And they're like, my team's telling me we can put 1 in. this year. Like we're so jammed with an EMR upgrade and a data migration, and we're absorbing 2 new hospitals. Like I have enough oxygen to give you one of these, so pick it. And so which section is going to get what they want for Christmas, and everybody else is going to get screwed? And this is the reality. It's like there's too much choice, and it's going to be too expensive and too hard to put it all in. So choices are going to have to be made, and without a framework to evaluate it, honestly, it's going to, whoever screams the loudest, and whichever solution appears to be the easiest to implement and the readiest to go, the least impact, that's what's going to probably be the first one through the door. And that's just how it goes.
I wonder what the considerations are when you think about the cost. And let's say you have 2 models and the difference of performance is fractional, but the one that is better is going to be significantly more money. So you pick the worst one. And what are the impacts of, you could have had a better model with more accuracy?
Yeah. The thing is, often, especially in larger academic health systems, they have some, it's not uncommon for them to be able to demand a pilot. And especially when you have a kind of a nascent industry like AI still is compared to many other industries, you can probably do some of these comparisons and pilots, and you can have some latitude and flexibility there. The one thing I think is interesting is when in this era where we have this great demand for improve the ROI, is a lot of what AI does is reduce risk. So in order to quantify risk, you have to say, what are the dollar impacts of causing harm to a patient, which is not a lot of people are A, good at doing because the data is not readily available. B, they're not comfortable doing it because you have to simply talk about, okay, well, if we kill a person or we maim a person or we harm a person or just delay treatment, continue their suffering, here's what that's worth to the health system. It's not a common human thing to do. And so I think that what's going to struggle is, and you have to make some assumptions on your numbers when you do that kind of thing. And the other thing is, in order to do it properly, you actually have to go and look at how poorly you are performing now. In other words, if this thing is going to be better than what we have to sit down and admit, what do we suck at? Like, where are we really doing a poor job? And that's not something people like to talk about or generally throw a bunch of highly talented, smart people at to bring to the light. So that's it. I think it's going to require to get a proper, true ROI for things that provide real clinical value, other than, I'll tell you this, because what happens is the argument is typically not about clinical value or risk reduction. It's about rad productivity. If you can shave 7 minutes off this type of procedure, 12 minutes off this type of procedure, your rad will go, oh, that's going to save me a ton of time. I'm going to be able to do all these fun things that I want to do. I'm going to be able to now leave early, feel comfortable, spend a little more time with my residents. What happens is the health system looks at it and says, okay, I just put $1 million into this thing, $500,000 into this thing. I'm going to squeeze 10% more out of my radiologist. Let me go find some more volume to shove down there, shove down into the reading room, so I can fill that gap and get more billings out there. So I think until the health system and the rads, AI vendors all get on the same page as to, like, what are we really trying to solve here? And who's actually going to benefit? He's writing the check for this thing. They're going to want to get some value out of it. Mm-hmm. The health system wants to get some value out of it. I'm not 100% convinced that AI is going to deliver the type of peace and job satisfaction and reduced burnout that rads think it will. I think it will in cases, but I think the volume is just going to get whatever vacation time is freed up by it is going to get jammed full of more work. That's my prediction.
This has been a good conversation, Don. I thank you very much for being part of this. Any closing thoughts before we wrap it up?
No, if anybody is watching this and hasn't actually been to a SIIM annual meeting, I do encourage you to attend. It's hard to put into a web page like that SIIM has and a program the value that's created. And I can think of just this last one, how many people I met for the first time, I've connected with afterwards, and we've had meaningful conversations that's helped both parties. And like that never would have happened, just at least I'm not going to spend the time on social media to interact with other people. That was
No.
I'll only do that at Sim hallways. That's how.
Yeah, that's a great point. That's a great way to leave it off. Awesome, Don. Thanks a lot, and
Thank you.
all the best.
SIIMcast has been brought to you by the Society of Imaging Informatics in Medicine. Please visit our website at SIIM.org for more information and educational content, including webinars and an archive of prior episodes. Please follow us on Twitter at SIIM_tweets. Thank you to our listeners for your continued support.